Welcome to episode 18 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about translatable skills in the game of hockey. And so there's a lot of translatable skills that go into hockey, and the importance of utilizing translatable skills can allow players to transfer their game up from younger levels and so on and so forth to being able to transfer their game through the minor pro ranks and being eventually able to translate that to the pro ranks as well in the higher tier leagues as the NHL. So when we're talking about translatable skills, a lot of what goes into translatable skills is really understanding the importance, for example, and we're going to start with neutral zone plays, attacking off the rush, and being able to understand how to incorporate dynamic routes and dynamic attacking. So when it comes to rush play, there's some examples when it comes to players who attack in straight line routes, especially on the perimeter of the ice, so the outside lanes in neutral ice compared to the middle. And so when doing that, it's going to create a favorable outcome for the defenseman 1v1, especially when they're defending the entry, depending on the speed differential and depending on the scenario with how much they are attacking in waves, if they have waves, if they have layers to the offense or not. So when it comes to rush play, attacking dynamic routes becomes really important. So, for example, when getting off the wall, moving laterally instead of moving straight north up ice without any sort of vision. And compared to another example would be where the F1 would come into the zone offensively, and then F2 would swing under and be able to be a support option. So that would be an example on entry and off the rush. But just in terms of neutral zone play in general, being able to have that diagonal and lateral movement is so crucial to be able to have those translatable aspects for players who are looking to come out of minor hockey and looking to develop their games coming into pro and so on and so forth as well. At the same time, it becomes really important the emphasis of not only attacking diagonally, but attacking with a purpose. So attacking with a purpose in terms of attacking, it could be attacking the defenseman, it could be attacking the situation, it could be attacking interior ice, having toe caps angled to the interior of the ice. It's a really big habit and really key habit for players to have, especially when getting off the wall. Being able to have your toe caps angled interior right away is so important and so crucial. Be able to generate that next sequence a little bit easier. And at the same time, you're looking at players who can diversify their skill sets in different ways when it comes to their off rush play and incorporating diagonal movement within their neutral zone patterning as well, because the diagonal movement forces interchanging of the neutral zone forecheck. It forces interchanging of D1 and D2 when defending the entry. It also forces movement of the goalie, believe it or not, even in the neutral zone, because the goalie is going to have to adjust their positioning on the fly, moving laterally to adapt to that new shot angle and adapt to that potential shot angle, even if it happens directly off the entry. Sometimes goalies can get surprised, and we've seen goalies and plenty of goalies get surprised in the past. So you don't necessarily know how or when things are going to happen. At the same time, you know that things are could happen very well when incorporating diagonal and fluid movement in that sense as well. And another thing, when talking about defensive zone play, we're going to talk about a lot of different aspects when it comes to translatable skills, because this is a point and a point of emphasis I really want to touch on in all specific areas and not just one area. And sometimes I've on this podcast in previous episodes, I've already pinpointed very specific details, but this is a more wide domain in terms of the attributes that we're trying to target and what we're trying to figure out in terms of the not only the data, but also at the same time understanding the translatable details that go within certain components of the game as well. And so in defensive zone play, being able to stay above pucks. Now, this is important as both a winger and as a center, because as a winger, obviously you have less responsibility in D zone. And we obviously have to mention the defenseman as well. Staying above pucks becomes even exponentially more important, especially at the net front area, protecting that slot area, being able to use stick play and feet positioning and being able to shield at the same time for defenders. So understanding how to utilize contact and absorb contact in ways that gives favor to the defenseman and their own play in that scenario. So that way they're able to stay above the puck and not allow the opposing player to get around them easily. Because if that player gets inside positioning, especially at the net front, becomes so much more potent in terms of being able to generate quick strike offense and offense off the touch. So if a pass, for example, comes out in front to the slot area, a player can touch that if they have inside position and they have a position and separation space gained on that defenseman. So it's really important for that aspect as well, but also being able to have that defensive awareness aspect and being able to shoulder check, being able to pre-scan. So these are different elements that are so simple, but sometimes players get in the habit of obviously losing those simple habits. They don't necessarily think about them as often. But pre-scanning, especially when you're looking over both shoulders, it has to be over both shoulders. It can't just be over one shoulder. Being able to do that as a habit over both shoulders, it allows the player to understand ice geography and understand where angles are coming from, where players are coming from, either in weak side space, strong side space. It can allow them to maintain the defensive positioning habits a little bit more effectively, maintain stick positioning as well, because if they're pre-scanning, they know how to utilize their stick and get sticks and seams as well. And at the same time, being able to leverage positioning along the wall and the center slot area as well, depending on the positioning. And it's really important just to leverage these overall aspects in order to create 50-50 pucks and really understanding what goes into creating 50-50 pucks and creating turnovers, creating loose opportunities, and being able to create those 50-50 pucks and turn them into offensive opportunities coming on breakouts and coming into the neutral zone ideally. As simple as it sounds, it's not always the easiest to do, especially when trying to gain an exit play and being able to exit with control and then control the rush with efficiency as well at the same time. Very hard aspects when talking about how to control possession in those scenarios coming off D zone sequences. So another thing is offensive zone play. And so we talked about D zone. Now we want to talk about O zone and O zone play. So, for example, playmaking, generating passes through seams. We talked about lateral movement, diagonal movement, tied to the neutral zone. Very important inside the offensive zone as well. So, being able to find those Royal Road plays. So, the Royal Road is the area below the top of the circle and between the goal line, and the Royal Road area is that road. It's a little road area. It's an invisible road, but it's down the slot area. So any pass or any carry that goes across there has the highest danger opportunity in terms of scoring chance. And that's not mentioning any sort of expected goals or any sort of model numbers in that regard. But at the same time, it's really mentioning and really keying in on focus when talking about the Royal Road efficiency and being able to generate lateral efficiency with puck movement as well, and being able to utilize puck placement, deception, and different components. But being able to gain that inside space and that inside ice becomes so much more potent, being able to generate so often. And so another thing is being able to understand how to distribute pucks in small areas and create triangles. And I mentioned previously in one of the episodes, one of the early episodes, how Phil Jackson created when he was with the Bulls, the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. He invented and was a particular inventor of the triangle offense. So the triangle offense, I don't necessarily know the whole story because it's basketball. I don't fully understand tactics within basketball. But what I did understand about it was that it creates constant fluidity, constant movement. So that way there's always an option open. There's always somebody open. It could be deep in the paint or it could be somebody high near to the three area where guys score from the arch or whatever they call it. I don't necessarily know. I'm not an expert with basketball, but when talking about how that applies to hockey, now you have options and you can create optionality when creating triangles and being able to understand, especially if you're an off puck player, how to create those little triangles in small areas to be able to be a support option for teammates. So if you have that anticipation, you're able to read that in small area settings to be able to understand the next sequence. That's very translatable in terms of not only at minor hockey, because minor hockey players, they don't have the small area prerequisite skills to be able to understand fluidity and understanding the next sequence. And sometimes they don't even have the cognitive function because they still have to develop their brains over time as a young player to really understand the ice and really understand what they're doing within their own games. And then there's other off ice aspects related to teenagers, which we're all teenagers, and sometimes other things get in the way, or it can also impact their on ice game as well. We don't know, but at the same time, there's a lot of different aspects, especially when talking about younger players, where that applies. So with younger players, it's really different in their development. So at the same time, how we tie this back into offensive zone play, being able to create those small area triangles, being able to understand how to leverage triangular sequences, create those little small area plays, and being able to bump pucks and be able to provide 1-2 touch passes to be able to make plays really efficiently and get defensive zone and get defensive players out of position. Really important and really key to be able to understand the offensive structure and the outcomes in general as well. And so there's a lot of different interchangeable routes that become really important when we're talking about translatable skills and the aspects, how those tie into the game in and of itself. So, for example, when I talk about interchangeable routes, a big thing is creating layers. And we mentioned this before in the forecheck situations and being able to potentially be an overlap option with F1 and F2 on entry. But being able to create layers in the offense and on the rush is so potent and so important to be able to generate that translatable factor from a player and from a team perspective as well. And being able to understand as F1, especially if you're forechecking the track scenario, how to cut ice in half, how to angle guys, how to use stick positioning, how to surf, how to cut the ice, and being able to limit the space of the defenseman. So F1's an interchangeable aspect because F1 can depend on the sequence, it can depend on the player, it can depend on the team structure. So with F1, F1's really important in terms of the interchangeable routes, the translatable aspects of F1. It depends on how F1's able to cut ice in half and limit space. And layers with F2 and F3 also become really important because you can limit space out the middle either by collapsing in the middle or you can limit space and try to force guys wide as well. And that can be a translatable skill in terms of defensive structure and team structure in general. And also being able to just understand general forecheck details. This could be angles, pursuit, initiating contact, being a gnat, so being around the puck often. Like Zach Hyman's a player who's a gnat. He's always around the puck. He's always pursuing with speed. He's always trying to initiate contact. He's annoying guys 24/7 on the forecheck. He's one of the best, if not the best, forechecker in the NHL because of his angular details, his hockey sense, his anticipation, his understanding of patterning, how he understands D1 and D2, and how he can cut ice in half. He doesn't necessarily surf a ton. He's not necessarily super relied upon as a skater or anything like that. But when you really look at the depth of his game and the depth of his mind, how he's able to actually initiate contact stems a lot through his anticipation, how he's able to absorb contact because he's not getting knocked off his feet easily. He's able to ride contact a lot easier because a lot of what Zach Hyman does in terms of forecheck efficiency, he understands that there's going to be physical components. He understands that there's going to be back pressure. Okay, so how do I anticipate the back pressure? When do I anticipate? How do I anticipate in this space? Pre-scanning is a big part of that. So he pre-scans a lot. He's able to understand the surrounding space and the timing he has in those situations. And at the same time, he understands how to strip 50-50 pucks and generate 50-50 pucks so efficiently. He's so good on forecheck retrievals, one of the best at it in the modern day game for sure. Another thing is leveraging track back. So Hyman's another really good player off the track back and being able to keep his toe caps interior and pointed interior on the track and being able to track with efficiency through the middle of the ice. You want to have players who are efficient when tracking back through the middle of the ice. You don't want them tracking through the outside lanes because the the attacking team in transition going the other way is going to try and leverage the middle of the ice as much as possible. So ideally, you want to shut that down. The translatable aspect comes from being able to track back through the middle in that regard as well. And so now we want to talk about shooting as well. We've talked about O zone, D zone. We talked a little bit about neutral zone at the start. Shooting is a big thing because you have a lot of different components that can be tied back into shots nowadays. It's not just, oh, you can shoot for the sake of shooting. Players are also shooting with efficiency. They're shooting with mechanical foundation and they're shooting to score from interior space. So they understand a lot of different components that sometimes in the older day game, it wouldn't be necessarily relied upon as much. And now there's a lot more hockey sense and timing attributes that go into not only the mechanics, but also understanding what really goes into the depth of the offensive zone play, being able to generate shots off the pass, off the catch, being able to shoot off either foot in stride. You have a lot of different components that tie back into shooting in and of itself that become really important. So I think of Austin Matthews and Connor Bedard, two are really, really, really elite shooters. Austin Matthews is already 60 goal scorer, nearly 70 goal scorer. And Connor Bedard is going to be elite goal scorer. He'll be a 40 or 50 goal guy eventually in the future because of that release and the dynamic and the mechanical foundation he has it on his release is already so elite and he has so many different prerequisite habits that allow him to transfer his weights with so much power. And he does it with at such an efficiency where goalies aren't able to read it right away. There's shot elements where he's hitting or hiding certain elements inside deception in terms of Bedard and how he's able to tie different components together, which is really unique and really different in terms of the modern day player. And another big thing is shooting with hip hop. So we talked yesterday about puck positioning elements and how important puck positioning is. Being able to generate shots through the hip pocket and being able to shoot off the hip is actually really underrated when talking about translatability and translatable skills. Shooting off the hip increases the radius of space at which you're shooting at. Shooting off the hip, you can tie different deceptive elements to that as well. So you can toe drag release, you can toe drag interior, you can toe drag exterior. So you can toe drag inside or outside, or you could just use deceptive elements to be able to potentially toe drag, go back to your backhand, and then roof backhand shelf shot, something along those lines. There's more of a radius of space when we talk about puck positioning elements where you can do different aspects with the hip pocket and understanding how to actually utilize the hip pocket. So when talking about Bedard, he's really elite, and this is one of his elite habits, elite shooting mechanics, shooting off the hip, because when he has that hand, I don't remember which hand exactly. It's either his top or his bottom hand. I believe it's his bottom because that would make more sense since he's shooting off the hip. I believe it's his bottom hand where when he shoots, he's shooting with his bottom hand off that hip. So it almost acts like a lever. So his snapshot and his actual wrist shot off the hip is so powerful and can generate so much power and can generate so much velocity and height in a short amount of time. Really unique when talking about Bedard. And on top of shooting, puck protection is another big element. And being able to, we've mentioned body position elements and puck protection elements. And one of the big things when it comes to puck protection translatability is being able to get body position first and then puck last. So tying back into the Zach Hyman example, what he's really good at also is being able to get body position first, absorb the contact, and then get the puck last. So when he gets the puck last, he's able to retrieve the puck and then he's able to acquire that puck and generate space in the next sequence in which he attacks. So when he attacks in his next route, he's able to get into space with much more efficiency. Versus if you're getting the puck first and you're not relying on body position, now it's going to be a lot harder to actually acquire the puck without losing speed and without the defenseman closing on you so much easier. So being able to get body position first, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually true. Body position first, then the puck last. It's going to be a lot easier in terms of favorability and leveraging that next sequence, that future space sequence. And it also helps center of gravity because you're not able to get knocked off the puck as easily because you're able to anticipate the space, anticipate the body position, anticipate the angle at which the defender is coming from. And with passing, this is one of the last attributes where, and perhaps one of the most important attributes, and I look at Nikita Kucherov as a really good example of this, is how passing translatable passing translatability component is leading teammates into space. And it's so underrated. It's so simple sometimes to do. But being able to lead teammates into space where they have speed, they're able to get underneath the puck with speed, and then they're able to maintain cruising speed when they have the puck. So they're putting teammates in a favorable space, in a favorable setting, in a favorable matchup, either off the rush, inside the offensive zone, wherever it may be, so that way that teammate's able to handle possession much easier and potentially extend possession for the whole team and the whole makeup of the team. So being able to pass into space, Nikita Kucherov is so good at doing it, especially with deception. I noticed it a lot in the neutral zone with him and how well he's able to pass into space and pass with fluidity and control and keeping pucks flat on the ice and being able to pass with precision and accuracy. So with Kucherov, he's so skilled at doing all those different attributes and you link them together, he's such a deceptive handler in and of itself that he can really link all these different attributes together. He's so important when it comes to being able to generate offense and being able to generate translatability within his playmaking and his offensive game and being able to use puck handling in many deceptive ways as well.